Are we ready? Do you hear me?
Hello.
This works, right? Yes, it was.
I see a lot of disappointed faces out there.
It's a good thing about the lighting, because you
cannot
can't
see
see how many people there are. Everybody, welcome. My name is Casey. I run the Mighty Diamonds. We help developers make better games, basically. And we all know why we're here today. Obviously, we have a main guest we want to talk about. But I saw Jacob in the back, and I just wanted to take the opportunity to, for those who don't know him, he runs the majority of this show. And I want to take the opportunity to thank him. We had an amazing partnership with him and his team. They're being super smooth, and we're really, really happy about our partnership.
Thank you, Casey.
Please, a round of applause for Jacob.
Thank you. Hey, I hope, I'm gonna leave stage now, but I just hope that you are having fun, that you feel like you're getting smarter a little bit, and that you will be here again 6 o'clock tonight for the Nordic Game Awards. There's some really good games out there, and they will be awarded. And after that, at 7 o'clock, you step right out after good old family entertainment, and you go out, and there's a reception for you at the restaurant with drinks and food and happiness, courtesy of Game City Hamburg. So I hope you'll stay for the entire day and night and have fun. All right? I'm out.
Thank you so much. So this guy makes my life so much easier. I've been starting doing talks and panels at a smaller stage, and I've worked my way up to this stage. And this guy makes everything so much easier. Okay, we don't have a title for this panel or talk today, but the title is Rami Unchained. So for those who are familiar with Rami and follow Rami, they know how he can, he has opinions. But just before I bring him on, me and Rami met a couple years ago. We actually started fighting on Twitter a long time ago. I stopped going to Twitter. It's a pretty, but I don't know how people do it these days. But anyways, but what's interesting with that is you can disagree with people, and you can still love them and have really good conversations and learn from them. And I've been working with him for a long time, and I learned so much from him. And I really appreciate him. And considering the amount of opportunities he has in front of him to do things, he dedicates a lot of his time to indies and helping indies, and he barely makes any money of that, which is crazy. And that's something that he's a genuine person, and that's something I'm really appreciative of something I'm learning a lot from. And that's why me and my team from the Mighty Diamonds, we're here this week. We've been helping a lot of indie developers and trying to give back. So thank you, Rami, for that inspiration. And by the way, Rami, last time we had a consultation, you didn't send me an invoice, just so you know. So without further ado, my next guest needs no introduction. Rami, come up. Have a seat.
Thank you.
Yeah, I thought a microphone would be
that'd
nicer.
be useful.
I hate those things in your head.
Yeah, they're hard.
And by the way, I'm sorry for everybody here because I rarely get to meet him face to face. So this is basically if this entire thing is gonna just be me and him, and I don't know.
We'll figure it out.
Yes, and we have a Q&A at the end potentially.
Very excited for that.
Yes. So I'm very curious to know what's going on these days.
Cool.
By the way, I'm very curious about your latest airport story, if there is any.
Well, the latest airport story was fun because I was flying my own airplane, so that helped. I don't own an airplane, I rent an airplane. But actually, after I come back from Nordic, I am going to something called a fly-in cinema. So 200 pilots from around Europe will fly to a small airport in the north of the Netherlands, where they have an inflatable cinema. And all 200 of us are going to watch an airplane movie. And then camp at the field. And then fly back home. It's super nice. It's very nice. It's been good for me because obviously so much of my life is games industry. That at some point in the last few years I realized it's really good to also have something outside of games that I have a community in and have passion for. And you never quite know how much you need that until you have it, and you're like, oh my God, it's so nice to get to the airport and it's like, what's the latest drama today? And they're like, oh, the wind is weird. Then I go to Twitter and it's like, what's the latest drama in games? And it's like, oh, layoffs, threats, fights.
Before this thing,
Yeah.
who was here for the Johan talk with Arrowhead? Okay, a bunch of people. So they've heard about drama.
There's a lot of drama. But having the aviation part of my brain just be something else entirely has been really good for me. So I'm really thankful that I picked that up.
Awesome.
Before this, my biggest hobby was Lego. And it was really Lego, I'll be honest. It was Lego because if you run a studio and your entire day is making decisions based on maybes, having a booklet that just goes like, if you put this brick on this brick, it's going to be pretty.
Something soothing.
Oh, it's so nice.
And you also run an Amazon warehouse in your if I remember correctly.
Yeah, kinda for hardware that is not allowed to be shipped to specific countries around the world, but they will ship it to me, so then I forward it. So
Okay.
yeah.
So obviously, I want to know more about what's going on with your business standings. So Vlambeer, obviously, you announced you're kind of departed from that thing.
Yeah.
But just to understand, okay, is there any ties left to that thing, or do you own any in the IPs, or what's going on?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting situation. So I used to run a game studio called Vlambeer. I founded that in 2010, and we made a whole bunch of games, best known for Ridiculous Fishing and Nuclear Throne. And I founded that together with another school dropout. It was me and another dropout, Jan-Willem Nijman. And for 10 years, we worked together, we made games. And actually, after exactly 10 years, we shut the studio down. Really because we had meant to make one game together, just to get out of dropping out and make some money. And then that kind of worked. So we kind of did that for 10 years. But the funny thing about my working relationship with JW, as we call them, is we don't really like each other. We just...
But that's the beauty.
I liked
that
it
earlier today. I mean, I was saying getting challenged by somebody.
Yeah.
That could actually make things.
So I have a lot of respect for JW. He's probably one of the best game designers I've ever met. Learning from him, watching him do his work has been just inspiring and instructional. But I would never invite him to my birthday party. That's just not. It's not a thing that
strictly business.
Yeah, and that worked really well. So we were okay with sort of hurting each other's feelings a little if needed to get something going in a certain way, but always very respectful, not on the person, just very much oh, you love this feature, it's bad.
It's like water and oil sometimes.
Yeah, a little bit of that.
Yeah.
And so when we shut Vlambeer down in 2010, 2020, the hope sort of was that it will be done. There's now an end to this story. We stopped collaborating. We both are in a very good place in our careers, so we're gonna let it flow. And the reality of pausing a very successful studio is just not that. There's still customer support, there's still updates. Apple is deprecating some SDK. This library doesn't work anymore. You need an update for this, you need an update for that. So there was still just actually quite a lot of work. And so at first we said, okay, I'll spend 1 hour a week doing that, and I'll take some money out of the company in exchange for that. But it really quickly became clear that I needed more time. And so as things went, we got into this weird space where nothing was happening the way it was supposed to, and neither of us was very happy about it. So we started talking about how we could fix that, and I think one of the best ways to fix it is the point of stopping Vlambeer is we didn't want to work together anymore. Not because we hate each other or because we're angry, but just because I think our creative collaboration was sort of fulfilled.
Visions,
it was completed.
Tastes, yeah.
The promise of Vlambeer, I think, to me always was 2 kids can start a studio and be successful. And that was a really big promise back in 2010. But by 2018, that was not a big promise anymore. That was just the reality of making games, right? If you're 2 people and you like it and you have enough time and space to do it, you can make a video game. That was not a big statement anymore. So then we started talking about, okay, how can we resolve this? And then we really quickly came to the conclusion that maybe it's better if one of us sells their half of the company to the other person. And then between me and him, his games aesthetically really fit the Vlambeer brand really, really well, while the projects that I'm working on I don't know how to explain it. I tell people I sort of hit that you know, when you have like a pop star, but they were like a kid when they started, you know, and they're known for like this one thing, and then they become like a teenager or like a young adult, and they go the other way and they go sit on a wrecking ball or something. Like that's where I am.
I understand.
I'm not gonna sit on a wrecking ball because I've already done screen shake, but I want to do something different. Right, so kind of where I'm sitting now is like I sold my part of Vlambeer. I now have the freedom and space to not worry about that anymore. I trust JW to take really good care of the brand because it is very dear to me. But yeah, I'm gonna do some different stuff.
Absolutely. So let's talk about what you're doing today then. I mean, are you a Dutch government employee?
No, I did become part of the Dutch Games Association. I'm now the government's relations person for the Dutch Games Association.
Government relations person?
Yeah. So I work with the Dutch government and the Dutch games industry and the European Game Developers Federation, like all parties sort of that do political work in the game space. And I try to make sure that we're aligned, that, you know, there's opportunities in the Netherlands, that we're not losing our competitive advantage towards, you know, like everybody else. And then we can sort of keep playing along. That's a big challenge. It's a fun challenge. I've done this work around the world, like you mentioned earlier. Like a large part of my career is going to places around the world. So you know, from Uruguay to Indonesia, from you know Colombia to New Zealand, kind of everywhere throughout Africa and South America and Asia, to figure out how to make the games industry a thing. You know, like how to make it sustainable, how to help it grow, how to create opportunity, how to connect people to knowledge and funding and all these things that we kind of take for granted exists when we're here.
Absolutely. And I have no idea how you have the time to do all that stuff, but...
Well, it happened by accident.
But tell me, so how much time are you putting on the Dutch government stuff?
At the moment, about a day a week.
Okay.
So it's about 1 day a week, and then let's say it's half a day at the start of the week and half a day at the end of the week.
And then there's the Indie Fund. What's
so
it called
the
again?
Global Games Fund.
Global Games Fund.
Yeah.
Okay. But that's not, is that an old thing or is that a new thing?
That's a new thing. We announced it last month, and it basically I got a bunch of. This was a fun thing because I've been wanting to do. So one of the things I realized is that knowledge.
Sorry, wait. Isa, is Isa here? Is there an Isa here?
There's no Isa here.
No. Okay, I told her to reach out to you. Just in case.
The Global Games Fund. The idea of the Global Games Fund is that I've been doing this thing called GameDev.world. It's an online conference, and the point of the conference is that all our talks can be given in any language that we support. And we support 8 languages. So we do English, but we do French, we do Spanish, we do Brazilian Portuguese, Japanese, Chinese, Arabic, and Hindi. And any speaker can speak in any of the languages. And the reason I wanted that is because I went to a conference in Spain once, and there was this girl that was giving a talk, and she was on a panel, and she was giving this talk in English. And she didn't really speak much, right? And when she spoke, it was a little like, and I know this person, and she's a young but incredibly gifted developer. And then a few hours later, I walked by a stage, and she was giving a talk in Spanish, and just the entire room was like hanging on every word she said, right? Like her personality shone through in Spanish so much more. And I took note of that, and then I was at the time, like 10 years ago, I was in Russia, and there was a talk in Russia at DevGam, and I gave a keynote, and the room was packed, and it was lovely, and then an hour later, I came back to that room, and somebody else was giving a talk, and the room was twice as full. And the speaker was speaking in Russian, and I couldn't understand a word, so I asked somebody, like, who's speaking? And they're like, oh, they're one of the most famous developers in the region. I'm like, what game did they make? And they're like, oh, this game, it's a Russian game. And I'm like, so I've never heard of this game, I've never heard of this person, and I will never be able to understand what he's saying, right? So put those two things together. I'm like, I want a conference where no matter what you speak or what language you speak, you can understand and learn from each other. So we made an octolingual games conference.
This is a further, it's a further extension of the democratization of games in a way.
I think it's important. I think the language barrier is much larger than people realize, and I think especially here in the Western world, it's really easy to go like, oh, we're all kind of trained in English, but you know, like if you've ever tried to work across borders with somebody who's not fluent in English, you can feel that even that there's a friction, right? Like you don't get your points across as well. You don't feel as eloquent. You don't feel as confident. And so when you're learning, I think it's really important that you have access to knowledge in your own language, in a language that feels true to you, that allows you to express it. That when you speak, you have opportunity to speak in your own language, where you feel confident and you have the ability to really make your point. So we do live translation for 24 hours for every talk that we do. And then from that came we sort of realized that giving knowledge is only half of the problem. Because if you have all the knowledge but you don't have money, you still can't make video games. So that's why we're launching the Global Games Fund. It's specifically aimed at places around the world. We're getting access to funding. There's no government funding. There's no regional funding. There's no funds. There's no investors. We'll give people small amounts of money to help them get started, get to where they can pitch their game. We'll mentor them in their own language. And so this is a brand new initiative. We're launching in June, next month.
Congratulations.
Very big. It's very scary.
So let me just ask the audience, how many people are looking for funding?
Yeah.
Okay, there's a couple of them. So now you know there's another opportunity here.
Yeah. And so that's really interesting. I think the main thing that I'm really excited about is to each of the funding partners, you know how they tell you to always sell by focusing on like what it's going to achieve. The point with this fund is I'm not trying to achieve any monetary like gain.
That's the problem.
Right. That's what made it really hard to get this funded. So I would go to these meetings, and there would be two people across from me, and they would ask me like, "So what are your KPIs? What are your goals for this fund?" And I would tell them like, "Listen, if I burn all the money, but there's 40 new sustainable studios at the other end of this, I'm happy." So that will lose you 90% of the conversations. Like they would just say like, "Oh, that's wonderful. Anyway, have a great day."
I was in a talk yesterday where we both love KM. And like, we're in it for money. I was like, yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. So for this one, I specifically needed partners that were not in it for money. So it took 3 to 5 years to raise the funds that we need, but every partner on board is okay with having this fund walk whatever way it does. And obviously, it is a fund. I would like to make money, because if I make money with the fund, I can invest in more games.
Absolutely.
So I can keep it sustainable, but it's not the goal. Our KPI, our only goal, is sustainable game studios around the world. And we measure sustainable by they not only get to ship their game, they get to the point where they can fund their next one.
I love it. Okay, so let's talk about the next thing, and it's okay if you don't want to talk about that, but I think you did announce it. You wanted to, or you are in the progress of starting a new studio?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fun.
I'm not sure how much do you want to talk about that?
I mean, yeah, I think, like I said, I have my Wrecking Ball era. So I want to do some very different things. I want to stretch my design muscles a little bit, and I think the way I'm setting up the studio is a bit more of a slate-based thing. So there's several games in production. The teams are separate. Each of the games is either weird or strange or different or just really interesting to me. So one of them is far more of a tech project than a games project. One of them is like very much an old school, like screen shaky, interesting, weird little plaything that I thought was very interesting. Each of the projects is very different. And I have a different role on each of the projects, and that makes it really interesting to me. So I can really take a lot of what I've learned from the consultancy and sort of apply it. But it's really good to
You're
be
like
back.
an internal consultant in a way.
Yeah, and a little bit. I think the thing that makes me really excited about it is doing consultancy. You really help. So I helped, in terms of what the feedback says. I've helped several hundred game studios in the last few years sort of figure out what they're doing, what their creative direction is, what their business plan is, their production. But there really is something different between me going like, hey, you should do this, and the choices on your end, and me going, hey, I should do this, and I have to make the call, right? And I feel like losing touch with that responsibility would make me worse at helping others. So I'm just happy to be programming again, mate. Like it's been years.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
So, but speaking of programming and game design, so do you have a framework, or like what's your, because we listened to Johan before you, and he talked about like the Arrowhead way of making games,
right?
Which is interesting, right? Like it's their trademark. So for you, what is important for you in designing a game, or how do you approach designing a game?
I think for me the main thing is like I really believe in making. I believe if you're going to make a game, the first thing you have to do is not make a game. Like the first thing you have to do is make a prototype, right? And I think people confuse that shit all the time.
So you said a prototype?
Prototype. You have to prove what you're thinking, right? Like there has to be a version of it that works. And I see people go on Reddit and ask like, is this a good idea? And I'm like, that's not how you check whether it's a good idea. You build it, you check it. And I spent years of my life as a programmer. I spent like the better part of a decade of my life learning how to be shit at programming. This is the biggest skill I've learned in my career, is being a worse programmer. Because I used to be a programmer that really wanted, I wanted my structure to be correct. I wanted the architecture to be nice. I wanted it to be expandable. I wanted, like beautiful inheritance chain, like just beautiful code. And the only people that are excited about that are other programmers. And then the only way they're excited about it is that they will still argue with me about where my brackets are. Like programmers have opinions about how good code looks, but it doesn't fucking matter to the video game.
But it sounds like chaos.
Programming is chaos. We're trying to take something from people's brain and then translate it into computer code, and then the computer code runs that on a chip that only does zeros and ones. Like, this is the dumbest job in the world, is we're translators from the chaos in a brain to the structure of a computer. The only nice thing about being a programmer compared to every other creative job in the games industry is that a programmer at least has somebody that will tell them that they fucked up. It's a compiler. The compiler will go like, oh, that's wrong. If you're an artist and you did it wrong, like, nobody will tell you. Right? It isn't like Photoshop won't go like, hey, listen, that's a bad choice, mate. Yep. Like, you should not have gone that, from that perspective, I was always too good of a programmer. And the thing I learned from JW, my co-founder at Vlambeer, is JW might be one of the worst programmers I've ever met. Like, genuinely, to the point of like, when Super Crate Box was coming to iOS, we worked with an external studio called Halfbot over in Canada, and they were porting the game, and they asked me for the source code for the game, and I looked at the source code for Super Crate Box, and I was like, I am not sending this. I refuse. This is the worst code in the history of man. Like, there's never been worse code than this, right? And so I told Melvin over at Halfbot, who was our contact there, I told him, like, listen, the code is kind of bad. It's probably better if you just, start from scratch, and we'll just send you like values. And Melvin was like, no, it can't be that bad. Send it over. And we're like,
I see where this is going.
Should we send it over? And then Melvin goes, no, send it over. And I'm like, okay, I send it over. So I get a mail back the next day from Melvin, and he says, this code is god-awful. Have it back. And he attached the file back to me. He literally went through the effort of just attaching the file and just going like, nope, we do not. And I think that, like, as a programmer, I'm like, yeah, he's right. It's terrible code. But like, as a designer, as a creative, like as somebody who now leads teams, having somebody like JW that doesn't give a shit about anything but whether it works, whether you can test it, whether it feels right, whether it has that. I know if I have to pick a program, the first question I ask on any project is like, do you write good code? And they're like, yes. And they go, yes. And I go like, do you have to write good code? And if they have to think about that question, I'm already less interested. If they go like, no, only if it's necessary, like.
That's an interesting mentality, because I feel like what you're describing is like the cowboys from the 80s and 90s who were like, coding and getting shit done.
I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, ultimately, you need a programmer to be able to write good code. Right? Because at the end of it, you still need to ship the thing, and it can't be a mess, right? But the idea that code needs to be good for the sole reason of that's good is not useful in game development, because programming is not the goal. It's a means, right?
So if I understand the answer to my question, there is no framework?
No, the framework is actually very aggressively build the shittiest version of the thing. Okay. Build the shittiest version of the thing as quickly as possible. One of the games that I'm doing went from first version to signed in 14 days, right? Like, the first idea we had, day one, it was an idea, it clicked, we realized it was good, we built the shittiest version. I got 3 people to work with me from a studio in the US. They worked with me, they built a version, I got an artist, they did an art pass, we did some mock-ups, we did some key art, we did sound pass, probably invested not even 15 grand on the entire pre-production phase, which is still a reasonable amount of money. Don't get me wrong, but it is also only there because I wanted to pay the team a fair amount. If you're a group of 5 students setting this up for the first time, you could do the exact same thing I did. No, I have advantages. I know the publishers. I know the people. But the idea of get there fast, try it fast, because a lot of indies, when I talk to them, they're like 11 months in, and they've spent 11 months of their life building this thing, and then they go pitch, and they talk to the publishers, and then the main feedback they get is like, oh, right now, we're not doing games about dogs. And it's a game about dogs. And they could have spent 2 days figuring out the earliest pitch of this game and pitching that. And then having publishers go, oh, we're not doing games about dogs. And they would have saved 11 months of their life, right?
Yep.
Like, I think one mistake that indies are making, is we're trusting publishers on how to deal with publishers, right? Because publishers have an incentive, which is to make their job as easy as possible. The least amount of pitches that are the most critical and most applicable to them. So when I work with indies, I tell them like, don't do fucking research. Don't check into a publisher. There's a giant list of publishers online. It's written by, it's kept up to date by a guy named Alan Dang. Alan Dang's list of game dev resources. It's free, it's available. It has every publisher that is currently doing indie games on that list with their contact details, what platforms they're on. You take that list, you make your pitch, you email every single one of them. You don't think about it, you don't research it, you just send it out. On their end, they have scouts, they have developer relations people that will look at your pitch, and within 15 seconds, they're going to go, nope. No, literally, you're not even taking a minute out of their day. They open the email, they go, action adventure game, nope, we're not interested. RTS, 3 million budget, nope, not interested. 60,000, too small. Like, 3 years development time, nope. They look for the first red flag, done.
Yep.
Right?
And it's nothing personal, it's more like,
It's just business.
criteria.
So from our end, we should be that. Right? Like we should just go, okay, we pitch it to everybody. And then we'll see. And then when you get like 3, 4, 5, 10 yeses or no yeses, you know where you are. And then the yeses, you research. They make sure, okay, this is who they are, this is what they like, this is why they might be interested. Okay, let's see like how this fits. That like I think we listen too much to publishers on how to deal with publishers. When publishers, they're not the enemy. They're not our friends either. They're just businesses trying to do business, right?
Absolutely. And I guess you also have to be picky with who you're working with, really, to be honest with you. Like, just like they're being picky with you, and again, I'll reference KM from yesterday. He was saying the same thing, like, just like we're vetting you and we're looking into who you are and what you're doing, you should probably do the same thing as well, the other way around.
But I think we have been taught as indies very much to do it preemptively. Pick your 10 favorite publishers, the best fit. The reality is, I work with these publishers, many of them, like I represent games towards these publishers, like week in, week out. There are things about these publishers that are not spoken. Minimum budgets, maximum budgets, timelines they like, genres they like, things they're moving into, things they're moving away to. You don't know those. So you can research for months and still don't know what you need to know about these 10 publishers. So fuck reaching 10 publishers. Email all of them.
I like that.
Just all of them. And if you really want to make a distinction, pick your 5 favorite or 10 favorite, the ones you really want to work with. Don't email them. Send it to everybody else, get your feedback, see how the response is, see whether people are into it, see what negative feedback you get. And after you've done that and you've processed the feedback and you have a new version of your pitch deck, then send it to the ones you like.
I wonder if publishers are going to catch on to this thing.
That's the thing. The point is, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right? Because here's the thing. We've caught on to what they do. They've caught on to what we do. So when a publisher comes to you and they do if anybody here has tried to fund an indie game, and a publisher goes, we really love the game. We think the budget is not quite a fit, and we don't really vibe with the atmosphere of the game. We don't think it's a good fit for our audience. I see developers go back and try to change the vibe of the game because they're assuming it's a conditional no. It's not a conditional no. It's a no. But publishers want you to like them. Because they want you, if this game isn't a thing for them, they want you to come back for the next thing. They're not hiding this. They're not.
And that would probably be also a big mistake because obviously, and again, I'll reference for Johan again, like you have a vision and you're trying to execute on something specific. If it's an emotion, if it's like,
Our job is to do the thing that publishers don't do, which is the creative part. Yeah. Right? Like we have a thing. And so the kind of pitches that I see fail very frequently are people that go in with like 3 versions of the game. They're like, we can do like the 100K version, the 300K version, the $1.5 million version. Honestly, if I was a publisher and I saw that coming in, I'm like, you don't know what game you want to make.
Yeah.
Pick the version. This is the best version, and I can sell this one best. That's the one you sell.
Absolutely. Let me because you mentioned dev resources, right? And you have a couple, or maybe many, free services.
Yeah.
If we call it that. So press kit, pitch deck. What other things do you have?
Budget spreadsheet for indies, newsletter
That's a new
obviously
one.
available. Yeah, it's been around for a while, but like it helps people do comparative analysis. So a lot of indies ask me like, what is the right budget? And there's no such thing as a right budget. A budget is a function of opportunity. So the more opportunity you can promise, the higher the budget you can ask. And obviously it has to be justified. That you can't just go like, but like the way I tell people forget that when publishers do a deal, like they very often they are under the impression that what's happening is the publisher funds the game. It's not really what's happening. The publisher is buying the publishing rights, and you're using that money to fund development of the things you now have to create because you have a publishing agreement, right? So technically, every indie game is self-funded. Like that's, and the reason that's important, even though it sounds a little semantic, is if you were a team of 3 people, right? And let's say every person earns 10K. Well, no, just to keep math simple, I'm not.
That's a really good.
They earn 10K a year.
Okay. Oh,
Bad.
Okay. Then it's bad.
Just to make it simple, and you need 2 years of development, right? That's 60K, right? And let's agree for now, for purpose of the example, that that's good, right? So you have 3 people doing 10K, 60K, 2 years of game. And now they make a game, and it's a little game about astronauts on a small spaceship backstabbing each other, right?
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, and they're all kind of squishy, and people will make merchandise out of it, like that kind of thing. Yeah. So you make that game, and now you're going to make a second game. 3 people, salary of 10K, 2 years. How much do you sell the game for? 60K or 25 million because it's the next Among Us? 25K. 25 mil.
Absolutely.
Because the point is, the amount of money you need to make the game is not actually relevant to the thing that is being sold, because the thing that's being sold is publishing rights. And the only reason publishers have tied these things together is because it allows them to fund games at the bottom end of the margin, right? Like, here's what we need to make the game. Here's the worst case scenario. Here's the best case scenario. So if I can fund here, all of this is opportunity, right?
Absolutely.
And that's just good business sense. Like, if they wouldn't do that, there would be no publishers, right? So they need to play that game. But it also makes it really important that developers understand that the way this works is not, there's no such thing as a good budget. There is a fair budget for the opportunity and the costs, right? And so one of the best ways of figuring that out is comparative analysis. You look at 3 other games, ones that made 70% of the budget you need, one that made about 130% of the budget made, one you made the 300%.
I saw that, by the way, as part of your the pitch deck, but I didn't like it.
You don't like it? I love that.
I don't
Tell
like
me
it
why.
because it doesn't matter to me.
Why doesn't it?
Because every game has its own situation. Pricing really doesn't matter. If people are interested in a product,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? You're delivering something that they want, then, you know, that price is the price that is correct.
Yeah.
So that's why from a pricing point of view, I don't think that is needed. Comparing games in terms of like, okay, we're trying to do this type of thing. Like, we're trying to hit on this note. We're trying to do a Dead Cell roguelike, blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
But pricing, I don't think that matters. But also...
For the price of the game, or for the sales price of the game to the publisher? For the funding
the
amount.
price of the game.
No, the price of the game, that's bullshit anyway.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as a real price. Like, we just make up a number. We go like, yeah, $12.99. Okay.
Sounds good.
Yeah, good. And then you go, okay, it's $12.99, so you sell it for $14.99 because then you can discount it, right? Like, that's how you do pricing. There's no correct number to price a game. But like, when it comes to selling a game to a publisher, the funding amount is technically the sales price for your publishing right. It's not your funding amount, it's sales price, right? You're selling publishing rights. And as soon as you can sort of like distinguish those things in your mind, you have a much easier time talking to publishers.
I love that. That's a really good tip. Let's see, what do we have here? There was something called meditations. What's that?
Meditation was a weird project I did. I once, you know like the crossword in the newspaper?
Yep.
It's like a daily thing, right?
The ones that I can never solve.
Yeah. I had one day where I just thought, like, I wish I had a different game for every day to play, like a 5-minute thing in the morning that I can just boot up, and it's like a different thing per day. And so I went and I got 366 developers together, because there's 366 days, and I told each of them to pick a day of the year and to make a game about what that day means to them. It has to be a 5-minute game. It needs no explanation. There cannot be a tutorial. It needs to be 5 minutes over and done, and then a description and the credits list. And so every day of the year, the Meditations launcher, which you can still download right now, meditations.games.
Is it like on a roll or right now? Okay.
Yep, it
That's
just
amazing.
loops.
Yep. It's free?
It's free. Every day you get a different game from a different
Beautiful.
developer, making something about why that day is important to them. And some games are very profound. There's one game about like somebody visiting her grandpa's graveyard, like gravestone. There's really silly games about like being a duck. You know, like there's games about like people who got a dog a specific day, and this game is a tribute to their dog. And like every day is its own thing, its own vibe, its own developer. I did one game about taking photos of a thunderstorm because that was what was happening on that day for me. When I went through my Google Photos, I just saw this amazing thunderstorm photo that I took, and so it's a game about taking photos of a storm. So every game is very different, and I really love that project. It was a hard project.
Is that a one and done or?
It was a hard project. Like
365 developers.
366 because
Oh,
we have a leap year.
So that game should only show up once every 4 years?
Yeah, it was great. That's the only game I curated.
Is that true though?
Yep.
Amazing.
I went to the developer, Pippin Bar in Montreal, and I just told him, like, listen, I have a very specific request for you. Can you do a 5-minute game?
Sorry, your game sucks. It will show up once every 4 years.
That can just only be available once every 4 years. And he looked at me and he was like, that sounds awesome. So,
but that's fucking art, man.
it was great. It was a great
That's
project.
art.
It was a hard project, I will say. Like, you know, I'm as a producer, managing.
I'm sorry, man. We have five more minutes.
Oh, they went straight to the 5 minutes timer.
Yes. So this is a mistake on my part.
All right, no, that's fine.
Because
Let's move to the next one.
No. We're gonna continue. The 5 minutes is for us to finish up, and then obviously we will have 5 more minutes for the audience.
All right, cool.
But this is a lesson for me. I should have told them I need like 2-3 hours for this thing. Yes.
That would be nice.
And that's not a joke. Okay, then quickly, 5 minutes. Indie apocalypse. What is it? Is it here yet? What's going on?
No, it's a fucking industry apocalypse. Here's the thing, right? Like there is no. All right, so I am a little angry about this. So I'm happy.
I heard there's like we're back to normal.
Not for us, for the money people. But okay, so here's the thing. There is no crisis, right? There is no crisis in games. Like, yes, we over-indexed in COVID, right? Like, yes, people had higher expectations of growth than we actually got because after COVID, it turns out people go outside and touch grass, right? Like, so that for the investors, that was sort of like,
to make more humans for infinite growth.
Yeah. So and that's not happening. So, so growth was adjusted down by like 5% or something. And that is a 50% drop from where investors expected it because they expected 10%. Let's just use these numbers. So they said it's going to go up 10, it went down 5, and the investors panicked because that's 50% lower of what they expected. So they just closed the money, right? They closed the money, then the economy took a hit at the same time. So all of them go like, fuck, well, I guess the games industry is dying now. And so companies start laying off people, not necessarily because it's necessary, but because if you want to correct for that 5% difference, you can correct it by earning more money or by spending less. So if you just drop the bottom 10% of your studio, you're still growing 10%. So basically, we just got fucked. Like the whole thing is super obnoxious, right? Because there is no hard reason for this. The industry was growing, numbers were good, everything looks nice, but from a shareholder perspective, it was not as exciting as we thought.
So is this the cultural thing? Like,
I don't think it's a cultural thing. I think it's a system thing. Like there is no way around this as long as studios are overwhelmingly held by shareholders because they will always benefit short-term gains over long-term gains.
That's the problem.
So you look at successful studios right now, Larian Games, they just make shit that they like and they do that for 30 years and then they make Baldur's Gate 3.
Yep.
That's incredible, right? You look at the studios that are making games that people are really paying attention to. It's not companies with shareholders most of the time because they can focus on retaining that talent. And the thing that's scary to me, every time this has happened so far, it was segmented. This part of the industry takes a blow, so these people can flow this way, they can flow that way, they will stay in the industry. Now it's across the board. And all these people are just gone. Like there are people that have been in the industry for 15 years and they're mailing me, they're like, can I start an indie studio? Because I am out of options. I cannot
is that
stay
even
anymore.
sustainable anymore?
No, because there's no money. Like money is coming back right now.
Yes.
Right? It's starting to get better. It's starting to get better because on the money side of things, the correction has happened now. And a lot of these companies will be hiring for the same job again. that they just laid off in like 3 to 6 months. Fiscal year has ended. They have it on the books. They're good. We're going to hire these people again because we need them.
Yep. So thank God that Valve is not a listed company. One.
I have my thoughts about Valve.
Well, I mean, I have
1 minute 25.
Okay, there you go. And also, like, what's the name of the late CEO of Nintendo?
Which I always forget which.
The one who
of them
took a salary cut when things weren't going good. Thank you.
That is, yeah. Bad with names, man. I'm sorry.
I mean, I'm worse, just so you know.
All right, good.
But like, yeah, what an amazing, like, you know, thing.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, I think that.
Why can't we see more of that? What the hell?
Yeah, just people that go like, hey, shit, the company's doing bad. I run the studio. I should take
And I also
accountability.
make like 100 times as much.
Can you imagine the idea? Because one of the things I do is leadership training, and like one of the things I always teach people going into leadership is like, if you do it right, it sucks. Like if you want to be in a leadership position, you take all responsibility for everything that goes wrong, and you give all credit to everything that goes right to your team. If you're a leader, you should probably be the most invisible person on the team in terms of like credit, right? The reality though is, with the way things are built, that's not how it works right now. Like leadership is power, and power gives you immunity from accountability, and that's why we're seeing all this nonsense happening in the games industry, because you just lay off 10, 15, 30% of your company and go like, but growth is up. You just burned the company, but hey, yeah, I mean, for this year, the numbers look nice. It's infuriating.
Okay, I don't want to end on a bad note.
All right, let's say something nice.
Let's switch to the Q&A. Maybe some people have
Please note
more fun questions.
Oh, God.
You guys don't have an extra mic, right? So you have an extra mic. Perfect. Okay, so just raise your hand, and let's get in some questions. We have 5 minutes, so please make your questions quick so we can get more
If anybody
answers from
starts
Rami.
with, this is not a question but a comment.
Yes.
Okay, let's see.
I have a question. What do you think about the whole Microsoft thing that happened recently, the whole closures, everything, and
Same fucking thing. It's infuriating because there's no good reason to do it. Also, the way they selected the companies is probably the worst thing I've ever heard. It's just like, oh, they were pitching, so there was no investment in those yet. The thing that hurts me about it is I know the people at the top of Microsoft, right? Like, and I've worked with them. I like them. I appreciate them. I think their heart is in the right place. But even Phil Spencer at some point said something along the lines of like, listen, I don't have the luxury of pretending the numbers don't matter. So these companies that control how game studios succeed, how they can continue, they're controlled by an interest that is much shorter term than games are. Like every time we do something, it's 2 years, 3 years, and Phil has to report these numbers every year, right? Every quarter, there needs to be good numbers, and if the numbers are not good, that's going to take a massive amount of money out of Microsoft, so he can't afford that. So the way the industry is structured right now is just very much towards, fuck the industry, let's make money, and if we have to burn the industry to make that money, we'll do that. And having somebody like Phil sort of basically openly saying that on Twitter to me was like, oh, we are really in trouble this time. Like this is not a small one. Like everybody is feeling this like we're not in a good spot. So we're not in a good spot. And the thing with Microsoft, fuck it. Like I hate it. It's making a successful game should allow you to make more games. I don't think that's a weird thing to say, but it is not true in the games industry right now, and that's not where we should be.
Okay, one more.
Hello, hello. So challenge this if you disagree, but right now, what's going on with the CEOs in Japan taking the pay cut, it feels to me like it's because there's a lot of laws in place to kind of make sure that the actual developers are protected from layoffs before all options have been extended. Now that you are more proactive in politics, I'm wanting to know, do you have any advice to developers who are very interested in being politically active to help build greater protections and rights for developers?
Can I just quickly? But so is that a real thing in Japan? Like, okay, cool.
It was in 2014 in Japan, so basically 10 years ago. And basically I think the Japanese workforce is less protected than these guys just took a pay cut.
Okay.
Yeah. which I think is incredible. So the question really was like, what kind of protections can we create? And I think right now the problem with this is that the system is working as intended. Like everything works like it should. And I think overwhelmingly what we're seeing is, and obviously this is way worse than over in the United States and across the ocean. And here we have relatively well-structured agreements.
Unions in Sweden at least.
Unions or collective bargaining agreements or any structures like that. I think your answer really has to be in places like that. Like working with a government requires that you align yourself with the incentives of that part of the government. So in some cases, working on the economic side, economic policy can help if you can prove that keeping people within studios, keeping them within the ecosystem, having this retention of developers instead of retention of players, like retention of developers, engagement of developers, actually should be a metric that is way higher on the list, because most of the successful games that are happening right now are from teams that know each other, trust each other, have worked with each other. And as soon as you take one person out of that equation, a team can fall apart, right? So seeing that a lot of these acquisitions, a lot of these growth corrections are coming from layoffs is actually a fairly good way of ensuring that over the next few years, the company will probably do worse unless there was some sort of necessary restructuring, which do exist. Like, I don't want to pretend all layoffs are the same, right? Because in some cases for a studio, it is necessary to keep 30 jobs to lay off 5 people. Like, that is okay. That happens. That's unfortunate. Probably bad management, but you know, if it is, I hope the manager take responsibility. But aligning yourself with what part of the government might be interested in what just requires you becoming active in the space, and that might take some time. But best thing I could say is if you have a developers association or organization in the country, to contact them and see what you can do to help there. And if you feel that that association is not representing your interests or incentives, build something on your own parallel and then get big enough that they have to work with you. I don't know where you are or what country you're in, but like in general, what developers want is one body that represents all interests, and if that body won't, then you just do it yourself. Cool.
So I wish we could have, you know, done a much longer talk.
That would be nice.
You. But yes, please give it up for Rami Ismail.
Thank you so much for being here and having this great talk, guys. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. See you then.